14 November 1942. Iron Bottom Sound, Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. The night air hung thick with tropical heat and the smell of salt water. On staff tables at South Pacific Command Headquarters in Noumea, typed summaries from the Savo Island disaster still carried weight. 5 Allied cruisers lost in a single night. Japanese searchlights and optics had carved through darkness like surgical instruments. American commanders expected improved scouting would solve the problem. Reality had other plans. That same month, while Japanese destroyer crews perfected their rapid-fire night runs, a quiet technical revolution arrived aboard United States battleships. New radar sets capable of seeing through darkness and weather. Fire control systems that could compute solutions without visual sighting. The numbers seemed impossible. But in plotting rooms lit only by dim red bulbs, young officers watched green phosphor tracks write themselves across cathode ray tubes. They did not yet know this technology would end Japan's night supremacy in a single engagement. October 1942. The waters off Guadalcanal carried a new name among sailors: Iron Bottom Sound. 5 Allied cruisers rested 600 feet down. The Battle of Savo Island on 9 August had demonstrated Japanese night-fighting doctrine with brutal clarity. Superior optics, trained lookouts, coordinated searchlight tactics. The worst defeat in United States naval history. Admiral William F. Halsey assumed South Pacific Command with one priority: solve the night-fighting problem. Admiral Ernest J. King circulated detection-focused critiques. The message was clear. Night action requires positive detection beyond visual means. The answer arrived in crates marked confidential SG surface search radar. Operating at 10-centimeter wavelength, the sets could resolve individual ships at 18,000 yards in complete darkness. More critically, they provided accurate range data feeding directly into fire control computers. Rear Admiral Willis Lee received command of Task Force 64. His flagship, USS Washington, BB-56. 9 16-inch 45 Mark VI main guns, 25-inch 38 weapons, and the SG radar that would change naval warfare. The technology was revolutionary. The SG provided precise range measurements accurate to within 100 yards. Feed that data into the Mark VIII Rangekeeper, the mechanical analog computer, and the system could compute deflection, time of flight, and superelevation without visual contact. Lieutenant Junior Grade Raymond W. Orcutt supervised Washington's plotting room. His October report stated, radar ranges to be primary for main battery, optical as check only. This represented doctrinal revolution. Pre-war training emphasized visual acquisition. The new system inverted everything. Detection first, tracking second, visual confirmation optional. A Comsipac summary stated the reality. Night action requires positive detection beyond visual means. Washington's crews trained throughout October and early November. Radar ranging procedures. Feeding SG data to the Mark VIII. Tracking targets on displays rather than optical sights. Exercises revealed remarkable accuracy. Radar-directed salvos maintained dispersion under 100 yards, 1/6 the typical optical night fire spread. Captain Glenn B. Davis submitted a gunnery report on 11 November. Radar-directed main battery fire achieves accuracy approaching daylight standards in complete darkness. Japanese intelligence noted American radar installations but misunderstood their significance. A Tokyo analysis stated, enemy radar gives range. Eyes find the enemy. They assumed radar would supplement visual acquisition, not replace it. This misunderstanding would cost Japan a battleship. Early November 1942. Noumea Harbor. Washington's SG radar mounted topside, antenna rotating continuously. In the plotting room, green phosphor displays showed contacts as bright pips. Lieutenant Orcutt drilled his fire control team relentlessly. The procedure was elegant. SG radar provided range. On-ship gyrocompass gave heading. Director tracking supplied bearing. Feed all three to the Mark VIII Rangekeeper, and the mechanical computer solved the fire control problem in real time. A drill on 8 November demonstrated potential. Washington engaged a target sled at 14,000 yards. Complete darkness. No illumination. First salvo long by 200 yards. Second salvo straddled. 4 of 9 shells within 50 yards of target. Optical night gunnery rarely achieved such accuracy in 5 salvos. Washington did it in 2. Lee's tactical doctrine specified radar detection and radar fire control as standard. Searchlights only if radar failed. Complete reversal of pre-war doctrine. Information over illumination. Detection over visibility. Washington would be Task Force 64's primary platform. Lee's battle plan. Prevent enemy bombardment of Henderson Field through radar-directed surface engagement. Intelligence from 10 November indicated Japanese heavy units at Truk preparing for sea. The target was obvious. Henderson Field. Task Force 64 sortied on 12 November. Washington, South Dakota. For destroyers. Radio silence. Radar operators watching continuously. Fire control crews rehearsing. In Washington's plotting room, Orchid check systems. SG operating normally. Mark 8 calibrated. Main battery ready. The radar that could see through darkness was about to face its first test. 10 November 1942. Truk Lagoon, Caroline Islands. Vice Admiral Kondo Nobutake reviewed staff charts aboard his flagship Atago. The operation was straightforward. Bombard Henderson Field. Cover supply convoys. Withdraw before dawn. Japanese planning assumed night supremacy. Every previous engagement had confirmed it. Savo Island. Cape Esperance. The first naval battle of Guadalcanal. Japanese optics, training, and doctrine consistently achieved surprise and decisive results. Kondo's force included heavy units. Battleship Kirishima, a modernized Congo-class fast battleship. Heavy cruisers Atago and Takao. Light cruisers Nagara and Sendai. 9 destroyers. Total firepower exceeded any American surface force in the South Pacific. Kirishima represented Japanese battleship modernization at its peak. Original construction. 1913 to 1915. Complete reconstruction. 1934 to 1940. The result. 8 14-inch 45 main guns. 16 6-inch secondary guns. Rebuilt machinery producing 136,000 shaft horsepower. Maximum speed 30 knots. The battleship also carried Japan's newest radar technology. Type 22 surface search radar provided range and bearing data. But the system operated at longer wavelength than American SG sets. Resolution was coarser. Range accuracy lower. Japanese doctrine treated radar as supplement to optical acquisition, not replacement for it. Captain Iwabuchi Sanji commanded Kirishima. His gunnery doctrine emphasized visual confirmation, searchlight coordination, rapid salvo fire once target illuminated. The approach had worked in previous engagements. No reason to doubt it now. Rear Admiral Abe Hiroaki had commanded the previous bombardment attempt on 13 November. His force had engaged American cruisers and destroyers in a chaotic night action. Abe's flagship battleship Hai suffered heavy damage and was scuttled the following day. Now Kondo would try again with fresh forces. Japanese planning documents from 10 November outlined the operation. Phase 1. Advance through Indispensable Strait. Phase 2. Bombardment of Henderson Field with Kirishima's 14-inch guns. Phase 3. Withdrawal before American airstrikes at dawn. Estimated American opposition. Destroyers and possibly cruisers. Japanese intelligence had not identified American battleships in the area. This intelligence failure would prove catastrophic. Japanese gunnery officers prepared bombardment loads. High explosive shells for airfield cratering. Incendiary rounds for fuel and ammunition storage. The plan called for Kirishima to fire approximately 500 rounds into the airfield complex. Previous bombardments had shown that sustained heavy-caliber fire could render the field unusable for days. But Henderson Field's continued operation represented a strategic problem for Japan. American aircraft based their interdicted supply runs, attacked troop convoys, bombed Japanese positions on Guadalcanal. Neutralizing the field was essential for Japanese operations. Condo's staff estimated minimal American surface opposition. Recent intelligence suggested most American heavy units were engaged elsewhere or under repair. The greatest threat would come from motor torpedo boats and submarines in the confined waters around Guadalcanal. Destroyers would screen against these threats. Heavy units would focus on bombardment and withdrawal. Japanese tactical doctrine for night surface action remained centered on illumination. Once contact established, searchlights would fix targets for main battery fire. Destroyers would launch Type 93 Long Lance torpedoes, oxygen-fueled weapons with 20,000-yard range carrying 1,000-pound warheads. Cruiser and battleship main batteries would engage under searchlight direction. The doctrine assumed both sides fought under the same limitations. Darkness affected everyone equally. Victory came to the force with better optics, training, and aggression. No one in Condo's staff considered that American technology might have eliminated darkness as a tactical factor. A gunnery note from Kirishima's fire control officer stated the standard doctrine: radar gives range. Eyes find the enemy. The assumption was fundamental. You could not shoot what you could not see. American doctrine had evolved beyond that assumption. Japanese doctrine had not. Condo's force sortied from Truk on 12 November. The ships formed screening disposition. Destroyers ahead. Heavy cruisers flanking. Kirishima in the center. Light cruisers providing close escort. The formation steamed southeast toward Guadalcanal at 24 knots. Weather was favorable. Scattered clouds. Calm seas. Good visibility for night optical work. Kondo expected to arrive off Henderson Field after midnight on 15 November. Bombardment would proceed for approximately 90 minutes. Withdrawal would be complete before dawn. Air attacks could develop. Intelligence summaries radioed to the force indicated no major American surface units in the area. Motor torpedo boats operating from Tulagi posed minor threat. Submarine contacts possible but unlikely in the confined approach waters. The path appeared clear. Japanese sailors prepared for action with disciplined routine. Ammunition passed to magazines. Fire control stations manned. Searchlight crews readied equipment. Optical rangefinders calibrated. Every system checked. But none of those preparations addressed the actual threat. While Japanese crews prepared searchlights and optical directors, American radar operators already tracked their approach on green phosphor screens. While Japanese lookouts scanned darkness with trained eyes, American fire control computers already computed ballistic solutions. The bombardment force sailed believing the Americans were blind. The Americans had already plotted their approach vector, estimated their composition, and prepared firing solutions. In modern terms, the Japanese were entering a sensor environment they did not understand. The battle would be decided before the first searchlight snapped on. Condo's force was steaming into a technological ambush. The doctrine that had worked at Savo Island was about to fail catastrophically against an enemy that no longer needed to see in order to shoot. 14 November 1942, 22:32 hours. Iron Bottom Sound, north of Guadalcanal. Washington's plotting room hummed with quiet activity under red battle lighting. The SG radar operator watched his cathode ray display. Green phosphor sweep rotating. Background noise minimal. Then a contact. Range 18,000 yards. Bearing 315 degrees. The pip was distinct, bright, moving. Surface contact bearing 315. Range 18,000. The operator reported. His voice was calm, professional. The moment they had trained for had arrived. Lieutenant Orcutt stepped to the display. The contact was solid. Definitely surface. Tracking south. He marked the position on the plotting board with grease pencil. Waited for the next sweep. The contact had moved. Bearing now 314. Range 17500. Multiple contacts. The operator updated. Count 3, possibly 4 targets. Bearing 315 to 320. Range 17500 to 18500. The plot took shape rapidly. Multiple ships in formation. Course approximately 130 degrees. Speed 24 to 26 knots. The geometry matched intelligence estimates. Japanese bombardment force inbound to Henderson Field. Orchid called the information to the bridge. Rear Admiral Lee received the report personally. His response was immediate. Maintain radar track. Do not illuminate. Prepare main battery for radar-directed fire. Washington's Combat Information Center began processing the contact. The ships were too far for visual acquisition. Moonlight was minimal, but radar painted them clearly. The SG continued providing range updates every few seconds. Bearing data refined continuously. The Mark 8 Rangekeeper began receiving inputs. Japanese expectation. Approach masked by darkness and weather. Japanese reality. Tracked continuously from beyond visual range by sensors they could neither see nor effectively counter. The tactical advantage was overwhelming. Washington knew enemy position, course, and speed. The Japanese knew nothing of American disposition. Lee could time his engagement precisely, choose his range, maintain surprise until the decisive moment. The CIC log recorded the sequence. 2232. First surface contact bearing 315, range 18,000. 2235. Multiple contacts confirmed. Composition assessed probable heavy units with destroyer screen. 2238. Track established. Target course 130, speed 24 knots. Every update refined the picture. The lead group appeared to be destroyers. Main body followed at 1 to 2,000 yards interval. Formation suggested standard Japanese night attack disposition. Fire control plotters began computing solutions. The Mark 8 Rangekeeper integrated radar range with own-ship data. Target motion analysis predicted future positions. Gun elevation and bearing calculations updated continuously as geometry changed. Washington maintained course and speed. No radar transmissions except the passive SG search. No visual signals. Complete electronic silence except for necessary radar. The battleship was invisible to Japanese sensors. South Dakota followed in Washington's wake. The second battleship also tracked contacts but struggled with electrical problems. Some radar displays flickered. Fire control computers showed intermittent faults. The ship could fight but not with Washington's precision. American destroyer screen picked up contacts on their less capable radar sets. The 4 destroyers, Walk, Benham, Preston, Gwynn, prepared for surface action. Their orders were clear. Screen the battleships, engage enemy destroyers if opportunity arose, but do not mask Washington's radar tracking. Japanese forces continued approach unaware of American presence. Condo S formation maintained standard night cruising disposition. Searchlight crews stood ready. Optical rangefinders manned. But no one was looking at the right sensor. Kirishima's Type 22 radar swept the area ahead. The set operated at longer wavelength than American SG radar. Detection ranges were shorter. Resolution coarser. Target discrimination difficult. The radar showed some returns, but plotting officers attributed them to land masses and weather clutter. This was the critical difference. American operators trained to interpret radar displays as primary tactical information. Japanese operators viewed radar as supplementary to visual acquisition. When Japanese radar showed ambiguous returns, the default assumption was not a target. When American radar showed similar returns, the default assumption was analyze further. Cultural and doctrinal factors reinforced the technology gap. Japanese night fighting doctrine emphasized human senses. Visual acuity, trained lookouts, optical superiority. Adding radar to the system meant fitting technology into existing doctrine. American development had gone the opposite direction. Doctrine reformed around radar capability. The range closed steadily. 17,000 yards. 6,000. Washington's plotting team tracked every course change, every speed variation. The Mark 8 Rangekeeper maintained continuous solution updates. Orchid watched the calculations with professional satisfaction. Deflection angles, time of flight, ballistic corrections. The machine computed faster and more accurately than any human team. Feed it good data and it produced excellent firing solutions. Range 15,000 yards. Japanese formation clearly defined now. Destroyer screen ahead. Heavy units following. The composition matched intelligence estimates. Battleship, cruisers, additional destroyers. This was Kondo's bombardment force. Lee made his decision. Close to decisive range. Maintain surprise. Hit hard when engagement opened. The plan was classic gunnery doctrine adapted to radar capability. 2250 hours. Range 14,000 yards. Washington's main battery trained out. Gun crews stood ready at their stations. Fire control solution locked. The battleship was ready to shoot. No one on the Japanese ships knew American heavy units were even present. The technological revolution was complete. Detection had separated from visibility. Fire control had separated from optical ranging. A battleship could now engage targets it could not see, from ranges where it could not be seen, with accuracy approaching daylight standards. 10 minutes before the Japanese expected first contact, Washington's fire control system had already computed the ballistic solution that would sink Kirishima. The searchlight that found enemies would not help in this battle. The eyes that spotted targets would see only darkness. But the radar that painted contacts through darkness had already decided the engagement. Chapter 5. Destroyer's Sacrifice. 2255 hours. Iron Bottom Sound. The American destroyer screen advanced into darkness ahead of the battleships. USS Washington, DD-416, led the formation. The Fletcher-class destroyer displaced 2,100 tons. Mounted 5 5-inch 38 guns. 10 21-inch torpedo tubes. Older radar equipment with limited surface search range. Her role: screen and scout for the battleships following astern. Benham, Preston, and Gwynn spread across the formation. 4 destroyers against a Japanese force that included 9 destroyers plus heavy units. The tactical mathematics were unfavorable. But their mission was not to win a destroyer duel. Their mission was to buy time and preserve battleship radar tracking. 2258 hours. Japanese searchlights snapped on. The night exploded into harsh white glare. Multiple beams swept the water. They found Wak almost immediately. What followed demonstrated the lethality of Japanese night fighting doctrine when it worked as designed. Heavy cruiser Atago, mounting 10 8-inch 50 guns, engaged first. Takao added her 8-inch battery. Kirishima's 14-inch guns shifted to the destroyer targets. Secondary batteries from multiple ships concentrated fire. The American destroyers were illuminated, tracked, and engaged within seconds. This was the system that had won at Savo Island.
Rapid Circlic Acquisition.
Concentrated fire. Overwhelming volume. Wak took the first hits at 2303 hours. 8-inch shells struck forward. One penetrated the forward magazine. The explosion broke the destroyer's back. She began sinking immediately. Crew abandoned ship. Within 6 minutes of first illumination, Wak was gone. Preston, DD-379, took concentrated fire from multiple ships. A 14-inch shell from Kirishima struck amidships. The explosion gutted the engineering spaces. Secondary hits tore through bridge and after superstructure. Preston lost power, steering, and fire control in less than 90 seconds. She was sinking before her torpedo mounts could train on targets. Survivors later reported the speed and violence of the engagement. One moment darkness and tension. Next moment blinding searchlight glare and the shriek of incoming shells. Then explosions, fire, and cold water. Benham, DD-397, took a torpedo hit forward. The blast severed her bow. The destroyer lost 50 feet of hull structure but remained afloat. Damage control crews fought flooding. The ship limped away from action, barely steerable, but alive. Gwynn, DD-433, took shell hits but remained functional. Her commanding officer ordered smoke and withdrew under covering fire from Washington's secondary battery. 4 destroyers engaged. 2 sunk in minutes. 1 crippled. 1 damaged. Japanese night fighting doctrine had worked exactly as designed. But the sacrifice achieved its purpose. Washington's radar continued tracking throughout the destroyer action. The SG set separated targets from debris and shell splashes. Range updates continued flowing to the Mark 8 rangekeeper. The destroyer engagement actually helped American fire control. Japanese searchlights revealed their own bearings. Gun flashes provided exact positions. Every illumination and every salvo refined Washington's tracking solution. The Combat Information Center log recorded the sequence. 2302. Enemy searchlights activate. Bearing 312 to 318. Multiple visual contacts. 2303. Destroyer screen heavily engaged. Main body maintaining radar track on primary targets. This was the critical exchange. The destroyers that burned first gave the battleship the exact geometry she needed. Japanese attention focused on the visible American ships. Washington remained in darkness, undetected, refining her firing solution. Lee watched from Washington's bridge. The destroyer action was visible as distant flashes and searchlight beams. He knew his screen was taking heavy casualties, but breaking radio silence to intervene would compromise Washington's surprise. The tactical calculus was brutal but clear. Let the destroyers fight. Maintain radar tracking. Wait for decisive range. The destroyer sacrifice bought time and information. Time for Washington to close range. Information about Japanese ship positions and capabilities. Every searchlight that snapped on marked a target. Every gun flash provided a bearing. The visible battle fed data to the invisible tracker. Japanese commanders believed they were winning. Enemy destroyers illuminated and engaged. Heavy damage observed. Apparently no other American forces in the area. Condo's staff began planning the final approach to Henderson Field. The bombardment mission seemed clear. But Washington closed to 12,000 yards. Range decreased to 10,000. The battleship's main battery remained trained on radar-track targets. No illumination. No gun flashes. No betrayal of position. Just continuous tracking and fire control solution updates. At 9,000 yards, Washington's Mark 8 rangekeeper showed firing solution quality rated excellent, deflection computed. Range accurate to within 100 yards. Target bearing and speed confirmed. Time of flight calculated. All elements aligned. The destroyer screen had done its job. Preston and Walk were sinking. Benham was crippled. Gwynn was damaged. But Washington had perfect fire control on the primary target. The Japanese had no idea an American battleship was tracking them from point-blank range in complete darkness. This was the evolution of naval warfare. Destroyers still screened. Cruisers still engaged. Battleships still fired. But now the battleship with radar supremacy could engage without being engaged. Could track without being tracked. Could shoot without being seen. The sailors who died on Walk and Preston gave their battleship the one thing radar technology required to reach full potential. Time to refine the solution. Their sacrifice would be measured in precise salvos and accurate gunnery. In a battleship engagement where one side shot blind and the other shot with machine precision. Range 8,500 yards. Solution locked. Main battery ready. Washington prepared to fire. Not at searchlight-illuminated targets. Not at visual contacts. But at radar-tracked coordinates that represented a Japanese battleship that had no idea she was about to take 16-inch armor-piercing shells from an opponent she could not see. 2308 hours. Washington's plotting room. Lieutenant Orcutt watched the Mark 8 rangekeeper settle into final solution. Every indicator showed green. Radar range, 8,400 yards. Target bearing, 310 degrees. Target course, 130. Target speed, 24 knots. The rangekeeper had computed everything. Deflection angle to account for target motion. Time of flight for 16-inch shells. On-ship movement. Wind. Even the slight roll and pitch. The mechanical computer integrated every variable into two simple outputs. Gun elevation and bearing. The Mark 38 director tracked the target on radar. No visual contact. The bridge reported darkness ahead. But the director pointed precisely at the radar-generated bearing. Pointers in the gun turrets followed their indicators. When the pointers aligned, the guns pointed at the target. Simple, mechanical, precise. This was the revolution. Fire control solution divorced from visual sighting. Gunnery divorced from illumination. A battleship could now fight blind and shoot straight. Rear Admiral Lee gave the order, "Commence firing main battery, 2309 hours." Washington's forward turrets fired. 3 16-inch 45 Mark VI guns. Each shell weighed 2,700 pounds. Muzzle velocity 2,500 feet per second. At 8,400 yards, time of flight was approximately 15 seconds. The salvo vanished into darkness. No visual observation of fall of shot, but radar tracked the shells. Splash patterns appeared on the SG display as temporary contacts. Plot measured the fall. First salvo landed short by approximately 200 yards. Correction computed immediately. Elevation increased slightly. Second salvo fired at 2309 hours and 40 seconds. This salvo straddled the target. Radar showed splashes bracketing the target pip. Some shells short, some over, some direct hits. The optical observation would have been spectacular. 2,700-pound armor-piercing shells slamming into a battleship's hull. But no one on Washington could see it. What they could see were the radar returns. Target pip flickered. Speed decreased. Course became erratic. The target was hit and hit hard. Dispersion on the second salvo measured approximately 90 yards. In daylight, that would be considered excellent gunnery. At night, shooting blind on radar alone, it was unprecedented. Pre-war night optical gunnery typically showed dispersion of 600 to 700 yards. Radar-directed fire was achieving better than 7-to-1 improvement in accuracy. Third salvo. Fourth salvo. Fifth salvo. Washington's main battery settled into rhythm. Salvo every 40 seconds. Each salvo 9 16-inch shells. Corrections computed from radar observation of fall. The fire control solution held stable despite target maneuvers. Japanese expectation. Main batteries require optical confirmation before firing. Japanese reality. Taking heavy caliber hits from an unseen shooter at point-blank range. The Mark VIII rangekeeper performed flawlessly. As target course changed, the computer recalculated deflection. As range changed, it adjusted time of flight. As target speed varied, it compensated. The solution tracked continuously, updating faster than any human gunnery team could compute. Washington's gunnery officer logged each salvo. Radar range at firing. Observed fall. Corrections applied. The data would become training material for every gunnery school in the United States Navy. This was the first time a battleship had fought an entire night engagement on radar alone. No searchlights, no star shells, no visual ranging. The technical challenge was immense. The SG radar had to maintain lock through shell splashes, smoke, and maneuver. The rangekeeper had to compensate for own ship and target motion simultaneously. The gun crews had to maintain mechanical precision while the ship rolled and pitched. Every element had to work perfectly. Everything worked perfectly. By 2312 hours, Washington had fired approximately 30 main battery rounds. The target's radar signature showed clear degradation. Speed had dropped from 24 knots to approximately 15. Course was erratic. The target was no longer maneuvering purposefully. She was reacting to damage. American fire control doctrine called this losing the initiative. The target could no longer execute a coherent battle plan. Damage control consumed all attention. Maneuvering became defensive rather than offensive. The ship was still afloat but no longer combat effective. Washington's bridge still reported no visual contact with the target. Darkness remained complete, but radar painted the picture clearly. A large surface contact, heavily damaged, losing speed, course erratic. The numbers told the story. Fire control teams recorded solution quality as stable throughout engagement. This was the critical metric. Pre-radar night gunnery rarely achieved stable solutions. Targets appeared and disappeared with illumination. Range estimates changed with searchlight position. Deflection calculations were often guesswork. The result was slow, scattered fire with low hit probability. Radar changed everything. Target never disappeared from tracking. Range updated continuously. Deflection computed mechanically. Solution quality remained stable. Fire was rapid, concentrated, accurate. The gunnery technique would be analyzed for decades. Feed precise range to a good fire control computer. Maintain stable tracking. Fire at optimal salvo intervals. Correct from observed fall. Repeat until target destroyed or out of action. Simple in concept. Revolutionary in execution. Washington demonstrated that radar technology had matured to the point where it could replace human vision in the fire control loop. Not supplement it. Replace it. This represented fundamental change in naval warfare. Some historians later called this engagement the blind battle, but Washington was not blind. She could see perfectly through electronics rather than optics. The blind ship was Kirishima, whose crew could not see what was hitting them or where it came from. By 23:15 hours, Washington had established fire superiority without the enemy achieving effective return fire. This was the dream of every gunnery officer. Uninterrupted shooting at an opponent who cannot shoot back accurately. The radar that had tracked Kirishima's approach now tracked her death. Green phosphor displays showed a target losing cohesion, speed, and fighting capability. The electronic signature of a battleship dying under precision radar fire. A battleship that recorded main battery hits before her bridge crew could see the target. That single fact changed naval doctrine for the rest of the war. 23:10 hours. Aboard IJN Kirishima, damage control teams raced through dark passageways filling with smoke and seawater. The first impacts came without warning. No searchlight had found an enemy. No lookouts had reported contacts. Yet heavy shells arrived with mechanical precision. The first salvo fell short. The second straddled. Armor-piercing projectiles smashed through belt armor, penetrated decks, detonated deep inside the ship. Lieutenant Yano Fumio, damage control officer, reported to the bridge from his station deep in the ship. Forward magazine flooding. Turret 1 hydraulics lost. Steering compartment reports casualties and system damage. Kirishima had been designed and rebuilt to withstand 14-inch gunfire. But the shells hitting her were 16-inch Mark VI armor-piercing rounds. Each carried explosive fillings designed to detonate after penetration. The terminal effects were catastrophic. A hit on Turret 2 jammed the training mechanism. The turret froze at 15 degrees port. Manual operation impossible. The electrical system was destroyed. 2 14-inch guns offline. More shells walked up the length of the ship. One penetrated the bridge structure. Casualties were immediate and severe. Communications lines severed. Fire control disrupted. The battleship's brain was partially destroyed. Engineering spaces took underwater hits. Not direct penetrations, but near-miss detonations. The underwater shock effects ruptured piping, cracked bulkheads, and distorted hull plates. Flooding began in multiple compartments simultaneously. Most critically, steering control was lost. A hit near the stern damaged the steering machinery. Kirishima began turning to starboard without command input. The helm would not respond. Emergency steering procedures initiated, but the damage was too extensive. The battleship began a slow, uncommanded turn. Japanese expectation. Illuminate opponent. Exchange fire. Hit harder and faster. Japanese reality. Taking systematic destruction from an unseen opponent whose fire arrived with metronome regularity. Kirishima's gunnery officers struggled to return fire, but they had no target. Searchlights swept the darkness. Nothing. Visual lookouts reported no contacts. Radar showed ambiguous returns, but nothing definite enough to shoot at. How do you fight an invisible enemy? The damage accumulated with each salvo. Washington fired every 40 seconds.
9 shells per salvo.
Some hit, some missed close. All contributed to progressive degradation of Kirishima's combat systems. Fire broke out in multiple locations.
Ammunition handling roms.
Crew berthing spaces. The galley. Firefighting teams attacked the blazes, but more fires started faster than they could be controlled. Smoke filled passageways. Ventilation systems spread toxic fumes. Speed dropped. Engineering reported reduced power from damaged boilers. Propulsion shaft bearings overheating from shock damage. Maximum speed fell to 12 knots, then 8. The battleship that had entered action at 26 knots could barely maintain steerage way. Post-war analysis of Kirishima's damage revealed the pattern of American fire. Hits clustered around critical areas. Forward turrets, bridge, engineering spaces, steering compartment. Either Washington's fire was remarkably accurate or her gunnery officers understood exactly where to aim for maximum effect. The truth was both. Radar provided accurate aim point, but Lee's instructions specified targeting for maximum damage. Hit the superstructure to disrupt command and control. Hit the waterline to induce flooding. Hit the engineering spaces to reduce mobility. Systematic destruction rather than random fire. Kirishima's officers recognized they were dying but could not identify the killer. Japanese doctrine provided no answer for this scenario. Every night fighting technique required seeing the enemy. If you cannot see, you cannot fight. The failure was doctrinal, not personal. Captain Iwabuchi ordered continuous searchlight sweeps, ordered increased radar scanning, ordered visual lookouts to maximum alert. Nothing worked. The American battleship remained invisible because Washington maintained strict emission control except for the passive SG search radar.
No illumination.
No fire from secondary battery that might reveal position. Just the main battery firing on radar solution alone. On Kirishima's plotting board, staff officers tried to determine attacker bearing from shell trajectories. The shells came from port quarter, bearing approximately 140 degrees. But visual searches in that direction revealed nothing. Either the range was too great for visual acquisition or the enemy was hidden by darkness and smoke. The range was not too great. Washington was at 8,000 yards, knife-fighting range for battleships. But complete darkness and strict light discipline made her invisible even at that distance. More hits. A near-miss explosion ruptured fuel tanks. Heavy oil began leaking. The oil mixed with seawater flooding lower compartments, creating an explosive vapor mixture. Fire hazard increased dramatically. Kirishima's list increased to 5 degrees starboard. Then 10 degrees. Counterflooding measures partially corrected but could not stop the progression. The battleship was slowly capsizing from progressive flooding and steering damage that held her in a constant turn. At 23:17 hours, Kirishima's fire control reported all main battery directors out of action. Even if targets were found, she could not shoot accurately. The battleship had lost her primary armament without achieving a single hit on the opponent. Damage assessment reports painted the full picture. Forward turrets inoperative. Bridge severely damaged. Steering lost. Speed reduced to less than 10 knots. Multiple fires uncontrolled. Progressive flooding. List increasing. The battleship was mission-killed. On Japanese plotting boards, the attacker's bearing remained nearly constant. This was the signature of a ship firing from constant bearing, changing range, classic gunnery tactics. But how was it possible to maintain such precision in complete darkness? The answer lay in technology Kirishima's crew could neither see nor understand. Radar tracking maintained constant bearing solution. Fire control computers calculated range changes automatically. The result was precisely what Japanese plotting officers observed. Consistent bearing, accurate fire, mechanical precision. Kondo received Kirishima's damage reports. His bombardment plan was collapsing. The battleship intended to shell Henderson Field was dying. American forces were more capable than intelligence suggested. The mission was failing. 23:20 hours. Washington ceased main battery fire temporarily. 75 rounds expended. Fire control reported target speed nearly 0. Heavy list observed on radar course erratic. Assessment. Target no longer combat effective. Kirishima was finished as a fighting unit. Not sunk yet, but irreversibly damaged. She would be scuttled before dawn to prevent capture. Her crew would be rescued by screening destroyers, but the battleship herself would join the other wrecks on the bottom of Iron Bottom Sound. The ship that planned to bombard Henderson Field never fired a single round at her intended target. 23:15 hours. Battleship South Dakota, BB-57, suffered electrical failure at the worst possible moment. Circuit breakers tripped throughout the ship. Radar displays went dark. Radio communications failed. Fire control computers lost power. The electrical fault traced to damaged wiring from previous action. Under combat maneuvering loads, insulation failed. Short circuits cascaded through distribution systems. Damage control parties worked frantically to restore power, but some systems remained offline. South Dakota was not helpless. Main battery remained functional on local control. Secondary battery could fire, but integrated fire control was degraded. The technological advantage Washington enjoyed, continuous radar tracking feeding fire control computers, was partially lost aboard South Dakota. Japanese searchlights found her at 23:17 hours. Without radar warning, without full electrical power, South Dakota became illuminated under multiple beams. Heavy cruiser Otago shifted fire from the destroyers. Takao added her 8-inch battery. Kirishima, despite damage, brought operational guns to bear. This was what Japanese night fighting doctrine was designed to do. Find enemy, illuminate, concentrate fire. South Dakota took over 40 hits in approximately 3 minutes. Most hits were 8-inch from the cruisers, some 14-inch from Kirishima. Secondary battery fire from multiple ships. The volume was devastating. Superstructure damage was extensive, but South Dakota's heavy armor mostly held. Belt armor deflected most heavy shells. Turret armor protected main battery. The battleship took severe punishment but remained combat-capable. Casualties were heavy in exposed positions. Bridge crew, secondary battery crews, fire control stations topside. Anywhere men fought without armor protection. But the ship's core systems survived. Engineering spaces remained functional. Main battery still operated. South Dakota could still fight despite visible damage. The critical effect was tactical, not physical. Every Japanese gun engaging South Dakota was not engaging Washington. Every searchlight illuminating South Dakota failed to find Washington. South Dakota became the decoy that preserved Washington's invisibility. Japanese commanders made the logical assumption. The illuminated American battleship was the primary threat. Concentrate fire. Destroy it quickly. This was standard doctrine. It was also exactly what Lee wanted them to think. Washington maintained radar track throughout South Dakota's ordeal. The SG set painted the entire tactical picture. Friendly ships, enemy ships, searchlight positions, gun flash bearings, everything. Washington's crew could see the battle developing even though they remained in darkness. South Dakota's electrical failures actually improved Washington's tactical position. Japanese attention focused entirely on the visible target. Kondo's staff believed they were engaging the main American force. The real threat, Washington's undamaged main battery and functional radar fire control, continued tracking Kirishima without interference. American 5-inch secondary batteries engaged searchlights opportunistically. The 5-inch 38 dual-purpose gun was highly effective against unarmored targets. Several Japanese searchlights were destroyed, but the Japanese had many searchlights. More snapped on as fast as they were shot out. South Dakota's commanding officer radioed contact report. Engaged multiple heavy units, taking concentrated fire. Electrical systems degraded. Remaining in action, the message confirmed what Lee already knew from radar. South Dakota was fighting hard but not controlling the engagement. Lee kept Washington dark. Main battery remained on Kirishima. Secondary battery engaged searchlights and illuminated targets, but did not reveal Washington's position. The battleship fired from darkness at a target lit by its own searchlights. Tactical perfection. Post-battle analysis showed the value of South Dakota's sacrifice. While she took 40-plus hits, Washington took 0. South Dakota drew fire that might have engaged Washington. South Dakota's electrical problems became tactical advantage. The visible ship absorbed attention. The invisible ship achieved the mission. Japanese after-action reports revealed the misidentification. Kondo's staff believed South Dakota was the only American battleship present. Kirishima's gunnery officers reported engaging the American battleship while taking fire from unknown sources. They fought what they could see. They died from what they could not see. This demonstrated fundamental limitation of optical night fighting doctrine. You engage what you illuminate. But what if the real threat remains unilluminated? What if the enemy can shoot without being seen? Japanese doctrine had no answer because Japanese technology could not create that tactical situation. South Dakota's crew fought with tremendous courage under impossible conditions. Partial electrical power, under concentrated fire, illuminated by multiple searchlights, taking dozens of hits. Yet the ship continued fighting, guns firing, damage control parties working, officers maintaining command despite casualties. This was precisely the fighting spirit Japanese doctrine expected to dominate night action. But fighting spirit cannot compensate for technological disadvantage. South Dakota fought hard. Washington fought smart. Smart won. 23:30 hours. South Dakota reported 42 shell hits counted so far. One main battery turret jammed. Multiple secondary battery positions destroyed. Radar masts damaged. Casualties in bridge and exposed positions. But main machinery operational. Main battery mostly functional. Ship still maneuvering and fighting. The only American ship the Japanese could see was not the one sinking their battleship. That sentence summarized the entire engagement. Visibility became a liability, not an advantage. The visible ship drew fire. The invisible ship delivered it. Washington continued systematic engagement of Kirishima. Radar tracking never wavered. Fire control solution never degraded. Salvo followed salvo with mechanical precision. By 23:35 hours, Washington had expended approximately 70 main battery rounds. Kirishima showed less than 5 knots speed, heavy list, and erratic maneuvering. The Japanese battleship was finished. South Dakota's ordeal ended when Japanese forces began withdrawing. Searchlights extinguished. Fire slackened. Kondo had received enough damage reports from Kirishima to know the mission had failed. The bombardment force would withdraw without accomplishing its objective. South Dakota limped away from action. Fires controlled but not extinguished. Electrical systems gradually restored. Casualties counted and treated. Damage assessed. The battleship would require extensive repairs but would fight again. Her post-action report recorded the brutal mathematics of night combat. Engaged at close range under multiple searchlights. Sustained 42 plus hits. Casualties estimated 65. Ship remains operational. Mission accomplished. Mission accomplished indeed. South Dakota had absorbed the Japanese attack. Washington had destroyed the Japanese bombardment capability. Henderson Field remained operational. The tactical and strategic objectives were achieved. 2 American battleships entered action. One drew fire. One delivered it. Together they accomplished what no American surface force had managed since the campaign began. Decisive night victory over a superior Japanese surface force. The battleship that fought in light would need months in a shipyard. The battleship that fought in darkness sailed away with undisturbed paint. 23:12 to 23:20 hours. 8 minutes. 9 complete salvos from Washington's main battery. 75 16-inch armor-piercing shells fired. The engagement represented everything American naval doctrine had developed over years of radar research. Continuous tracking. Stable fire control solution.
Rapid corrections.
Mechanical precision. Every element working together to produce lethality far exceeding pre-radar capabilities. Salvo clocks measured intervals precisely. Fire control doctrine specified 40-second intervals for main battery fire. This allowed time for fall of shot observation, correction computation, and gun reloading. Washington's crew executed the procedure with textbook precision throughout the engagement. Each salvo followed the same pattern. Mark 8 rangekeeper computed elevation and bearing. Gun directors transmitted solution to turrets. Gun crews loaded and trained. Pointers aligned indicators. Turret captains reported. Ready gunnery officer gave fire command. 9 16-inch guns fired within 1 second of each other. The shells flew for approximately 15 seconds at current range. Time of flight decreased as range closed from 8,000 to 7,000 yards. Fire control computers compensated automatically. Elevation decreased. Deflection angles adjusted. The solution tracked continuously despite changing geometry. Radar observed fall of shot. SG returns showed splash patterns. Plot measured deviations. Over. Short. Left. Right. Corrections computed immediately. Next salvo adjusted. The feedback loop operated faster than any pre-radar system could achieve. By the third salvo, Washington achieved consistent straddles. Shells bracketing target. Some hitting. The dispersion pattern measured 90 to 100 yards. Exceptional accuracy for any gunnery. Unprecedented for night combat. Battery officers recorded salvo sequences for later analysis. First salvo, short 200 yards. Second salvo, straddle with hits observed. Third salvo, straddle, multiple hits. Fourth through ninth salvos, continuous straddles or direct hits. Target course and speed progressively degraded. Target's ability to maneuver away from fall of shot progressively eliminated. This was the critical advantage of radar fire control. The solution improved with each salvo. Corrections accumulated. The fire control computer learned the target's behavior. By the 8th and 9th salvos, Washington was hitting reliably with minimal correction required. Post-war naval technical mission analysis examined Kirishima's wreck. Penetration assessments indicated approximately 20 to 25 hits from 16-inch shells. Given 75 rounds fired, hit percentage was approximately 30%. Night. Against a maneuvering target. Without visual observation. This represented 7 to 8 times better accuracy than pre-radar night gunnery typically achieved. Japanese damage control parties could not cope with the rate of incoming damage. Each salvo brought multiple hits. Flooding increased faster than pumps could control. Fires spread faster than firefighting teams could suppress. Casualties accumulated faster than medical parties could treat. The battleship was dying by increments. Kirishima's list increased throughout the 8-minute engagement. 5 degrees at 23:12 hours. 10 degrees at 23:15. 15 degrees at 23:18. 20 degrees at 23:20. The progressive flooding was irreversible. Counterflooding measures failed to stop the list increase. Engineering spaces reported main machinery damage. Boiler casualties. Shaft bearing failures. Electrical distribution failures. The hits and near-miss underwater explosions had damaged systems throughout the engineering plant. Maximum speed fell below 8 knots, then below 5 knots. Finally, bare steerage way. Forward turrets reported total loss of training and elevation capability. Hydraulic systems destroyed. Manual operation impossible due to electrical damage. The main battery was offline. Even if Kirishima found a target, she could not shoot. Bridge communications reported mounting casualties and system failures. Fire control computers offline. Radar inoperative. Voice communications limited. Command and control degraded to messengers and sound-powered phones. The battleship's nervous system was severed. Most devastating. Steering remained jammed. The uncommanded turn continued. Kirishima described a slow circle to starboard, completely unable to maneuver purposefully. Target tracking was impossible when you cannot control your own movement. Washington's action log recorded the clinical details. 23:12. Commence main battery fire. 23:12:40. Salvo 2. Straddle observed. 23:13:20. Salvo 3. Multiple hits observed. 23:14. Salvo 4. Target course becoming erratic. 2315. Salvo 5. Target speed decreasing. 2316. Salvo 6. Heavy list observed on target. 2317. Salvo 7. Target speed less than 10 knots. 2318. Salvo 8. Target circling. 2319. Salvo 9. Target assessed, mission killed. 2320. Cease fire. Main battery. The engagement was a case study in radar gunnery. Every element of the fire control system performed as designed. Radar tracking maintained lock through smoke, splashes, and target maneuvers. The Mark 8 Rangekeeper computed accurate solutions despite changing geometry. Gun crews maintained loading and firing cycle times. Battery officers maintained coordination. The ship itself provided stable platform despite maneuvering and recoil. Most importantly, the solution quality never degraded. Pre-radar night gunnery often showed declining accuracy as engagement progressed. Smoke obscured targets. Flashless powder failed. Searchlights were shot out. Optical rangefinders lost track. Fire control solutions collapsed. Accuracy decreased.
Salvo intervals lentened.
Effectiveness declined. None of that happened with radar fire control. Smoke did not affect radar. Darkness did not affect radar. Target maneuvers were tracked continuously. The solution remained stable from first to last salvo. This represented fundamental change in naval combat capability. The accuracy numbers from this sequence became teaching material throughout the United States Navy. Gunnery schools analyzed every salvo. Fire control schools studied the procedures. Fleet training incorporated the lessons. Within 6 months, radar-directed main battery fire became standard doctrine for night surface action. Japanese post-war analysis of the engagement reached stark conclusion. Kirishima was destroyed by an enemy she could not see, using technology we did not understand, employing tactics we could not counter. 8 minutes, 9 salvos, 1 Japanese battleship mission killed. 0 effective Japanese return fire on Washington. The numbers told the story. Radar had changed night combat from confused, chaotic short-range brawls into systematic, controlled, medium-range engagements where the side with better sensors dominated completely. This was the future of naval warfare. Detection, tracking, fire control, all divorced from human visual capability. All dependent on electronic sensors and mechanical computers. All impossible 10 years earlier. The engagement also proved that American industrial and technical capability could match and exceed Japanese tactical skill. Japan had invested decades in night fighting training. The United States invested months in radar development. Technology overcame experience. A kill chain without visual acquisition. That phrase summarized the revolution. From detection through destruction, human eyes never directly observed the target. Sensors found it. Computers tracked it. Machines aimed at it. Guns fired at it. All in complete darkness. 23:25 hours. Vice Admiral Kondo received the signal from Kirishima. Minimal detail but devastating implications. Heavy damage. Loss of steering. Main battery inoperative. Speed less than 5 knots. Mission capability lost. Kondo's bombardment plan collapsed. Kirishima could not shell Henderson Field. Could barely maneuver. Was apparently under attack from American forces of unknown composition. The mission had failed. Additional reports confirmed the disaster. Destroyers Preston and Walk sunk. Benham crippled. Japanese forces had achieved local tactical success against American destroyers but lost strategic capability when Kirishima was destroyed. Trading destroyers for a battleship was acceptable mathematics. Trading a battleship mission for destroyer victories was strategic failure. Kondo ordered withdrawal at 23:27 hours. The remaining heavy units would screen Kirishima's retirement if possible, or evacuate her crew if necessary. The supply convoy would abort its approach. The operation was over. Japanese signals traffic increased as screening destroyers received orders. Asagumo and Terazuki would close Kirishima and prepare rescue operations. Nagara would coordinate destroyer screen. Otago and Takao would cover withdrawal. Speed 20 knots. Course north. Retire from action area before dawn. 23:30 hours. Washington maintained radar track on retiring Japanese forces. Range opening. Lee considered pursuing but rejected the option. His mission was protecting Henderson Field, not seeking fleet engagement. Kirishima was mission killed. Other Japanese heavy units were withdrawing. Henderson Field was safe. The tactical objectives were achieved. Lee ordered ceasefire at 23:32 hours. Main battery expenditure, 75 armor-piercing rounds. Secondary battery expenditure, approximately 120 high-explosive and star shell rounds. Torpedo expenditure, 0. Washington had fought a pure gunnery duel and won decisively. The battleship maintained course toward Guadalcanal. Radar continued sweeping. Combat Information Center remained at full alert. The Japanese had withdrawn but could reverse course. American commanders had learned not to assume Japanese intentions from temporary movements. South Dakota limped along in formation. Damage assessment parties worked through the night cataloging hits and casualties. The battleship could still fight but needed shipyard repair. She would remain operational for screening duties but was not fit for sustained combat operations. Surviving destroyers Gwyn and damaged Benham withdrew toward Tulagi. Both needed immediate attention. Gwyn's damage was moderate and reparable at forward bases. Benham's bow damage required towing to major shipyard facilities. 00:30 hours. 15 November. Kirishima was sinking. Her crew had fought damage control for over an hour. Pumps could not keep up with flooding. List exceeded 30 degrees. Power failed throughout the ship. Captain Iwabuchi ordered abandon ship. Japanese destroyers Asagumo and Terazuki closed to rescue survivors. The operation proceeded with typical Japanese efficiency despite darkness and combat conditions. Boats launched. Swimmers recovered. Within 90 minutes, most of Kirishima's crew was evacuated. 01:15 hours. Scuttling charges detonated. Kirishima's remaining watertight integrity collapsed. The battleship rolled to starboard. Capsized. Slipped beneath the surface. Another wreck for Iron Bottom Sounds collection. Post-war records indicated approximately 250 Kirishima crew killed or died of wounds. Approximately 1,100 rescued. The casualties were severe but not catastrophic. Japanese damage control and abandonment procedures had worked well. But the battleship herself was lost. Kondo's force retired toward Truk. The Admiral's after-action report was brief and factual. Bombardment mission not executed due to battleship main unit heavy damage from unidentified American forces. Enemy demonstrated capability for accurate fire in darkness at medium range. Recommend review of night fighting doctrine. That recommendation would echo through Japanese naval staff for the remainder of the war. But doctrinal change requires technical capability to support it. Japan lacked the radar technology to replicate American night fighting capability. Knowing the problem and solving the problem were different challenges. Henderson Field operation boards at dawn showed results. Night bombardment. None attempted. Tokyo Express convoy turned back. Japanese battleship sunk. American casualties. 2 destroyers sunk. 1 crippled. 1 battleship damaged but operational. Tactical verdict. American victory. Strategic implications were more significant. Henderson Field remained fully operational. Air operations continued uninterrupted. Japanese supply runs faced continued interdiction. The Guadalcanal campaign would continue with American air superiority intact. The critical factor was the prevention of bombardment. Previous Japanese heavy-caliber shelling had rendered Henderson Field unusable for days. Repeated bombardments might have forced American air withdrawal from Guadalcanal. That would have changed the entire campaign dynamic. Japanese destroyers could operate freely. Supply convoys could arrive unmolested. Ground forces could be reinforced effectively. Instead, Kirishima never fired a single bombardment round. The fleet that sailed to blind Henderson Field left the area without accomplishing any part of its mission. The airfield that was supposed to be cratered and burning conducted normal operations the next day. American commanders recognized the turning point. Henderson Field remained viable. Japanese naval surface forces had failed to neutralize it. Future Tokyo Express runs would face American surface forces equipped with radar and willing to fight at night. The balance of night combat capability had shifted. A COMSAPAC situation report from 15 November summarized the outcome. Enemy bombardment mission prevented. Henderson Field operational. Night surface engagement resulted in enemy battleship destroyed. Own forces damaged but combat effective. Radar demonstrated decisive value in night action. That final sentence captured the essence. Radar demonstrated decisive value. Not supplementary value. Not useful capability. Decisive value. The technology that had been experimental 18 months earlier was now proven in combat. The doctrine built around that technology was validated. The training that integrated radar with fire control was vindicated. Japanese losses extended beyond one battleship. They lost the initiative in night surface action, lost confidence in their night fighting doctrine, lost strategic option of heavy bombardment, lost time while American forces consolidated and reinforced. American gains extended beyond preserving Henderson Field, gained confidence in radar night fighting capability, gained validation of new doctrine, gained operational experience with integrated fire control, gained strategic flexibility from air superiority maintained. The fleet that planned to blind the airfield left the area without firing a single bombardment round. That sentence summarized the operation's complete failure from Japanese perspective. Every objective unachieved. Primary unit lost. Mission failed. From American perspective, mission accomplished. Henderson Field protected. Enemy bombardment capability destroyed. Night fighting doctrine proven. The battle was a clean victory at operational and strategic levels. Washington steamed south at dawn. Radar antenna still rotating. SG set still operational. Mark 8 rangekeeper still computing. Gun barrels still clean. The battleship that fought the night battle sailed away ready to fight again immediately. Morning light revealed what radar had masked. Washington showed no battle damage. No shell hits. No near-miss splinter damage. No fire damage. The battleship was untouched. Inspection parties walked Washington's deck at dawn on 15 November. They cataloged 0 enemy shell impacts. Paint was intact. Structural members undamaged. Weapons systems fully operational. The only evidence of combat was empty shell casings and depleted ready ammunition. Topside crews checked radar antennas and fire control directors. SG antenna operational. Mark 38 directors functional. Communication systems working. The entire fire control system had operated through intense combat without degradation or failure. Rear Admiral Lee signed the action report in Washington's wardroom that morning. The document was factual and precise. Enemy contact at 22:32 hours. Engagement commenced 23:09 hours. Ceased fire 23:32 hours. Main battery expenditure 75 rounds. Enemy battleship assessed destroyed. Own ship undamaged. Casualties 0. 0 casualties. That statistic was as remarkable as 0 hits. Washington had fought a battleship duel and suffered no damage and no personnel losses. The contrast with South Dakota, which took over 40 hits and 65 casualties, demonstrated the value of maintaining invisibility through strict emission control. Gunnery officers annotated radar performance in technical appendices. SG radar maintained continuous track on multiple targets throughout engagement. No loss of contact. No degradation from smoke, splashes, or maneuver. Fire control solution quality rated excellent continuously. The technology had performed beyond pre-war expectations. Intelligence officers collated Japanese radio intercepts. Traffic analysis revealed Kirishima's loss and Japanese confusion about American force composition. Several intercepts suggested Japanese commanders did not initially believe an American battleship was present. The invisibility Washington maintained was so complete that even after the engagement, Japanese forces were uncertain what had engaged them. The Action Reports technical section became immediate training material. Fleet commands copied and distributed it. Gunnery schools analyzed every aspect. Radar schools studied the tracking procedures. Fire control schools examined the solution computations. Within weeks, Washington's engagement technique was standard doctrine throughout the United States Pacific Fleet. A key finding: radar primary, optical secondary doctrine worked. Traditional night fighting wisdom held that visual confirmation was essential before main battery fire. Washington proved that doctrine was obsolete. Good radar and good fire control computers eliminated visual confirmation requirement. You could shoot what you could see electronically, even if you could not see it optically. The contrast between American and Japanese technology became doctrine material. Japanese Type 22 radar, longer wavelength, coarser resolution, treated as supplementary to optics. American SG radar, shorter wavelength, fine resolution, treated as primary fire control sensor. That technical difference translated directly to tactical outcome. Washington's fuel status at dawn: approximately 70% remaining. Ammunition status: main battery 60% remaining, secondary battery 80% remaining. Machinery status: all systems operational. Combat capability: 100%. The battleship was immediately available for continued operations. This operational availability represented another advantage of radar night fighting. Pre-radar night engagements often left all participants damaged and needing repair. Confused close-range actions with multiple ships firing in all directions generated mutual damage even for victorious forces. Radar-directed engagement from controlled range allowed selective engagement and damage avoidance. Lee's report concluded: enemy illumination ineffective. Radar decisive. No hits sustained. Each sentence supported the new doctrine. Enemy searchlights, the core of Japanese night fighting technique, achieved nothing against strict emission control. Radar, the American technical advantage, decided the engagement. No hits sustained, the proof that the doctrine worked. Washington Navy Yard would later install improved radar sets on additional battleships using lessons from this engagement. But the basic SG radar and Mark 8 rangekeeper combination was proven sufficient for decisive night combat. The technology was mature and ready for fleet-wide deployment. Naval technical mission reports from 1943 analyzed the engagement exhaustively. One finding: radar-directed gunnery achieved hit rates comparable to daylight visual gunnery under ideal conditions. Night was no longer a limitation on naval gunnery accuracy. This represented fundamental revolution in naval warfare. Fleet training syllabi revised to emphasize radar plot training. Combat Information Center procedures.
Radar tracking technique.
Fire control computer operation. The skills required for effective radar night fighting were different from pre-war night fighting skills. Training programs adapted rapidly. Experienced Japanese Navy officers later acknowledged the technological defeat. Post-war analysis by former IJN Commander Fukui Shirzwa stated, "The Kirishima action demonstrated the decisive effect of enemy radar in night battle. Our doctrine assumed both sides fought under similar technical limitations. When the Americans eliminated those limitations through technology, our doctrine became obsolete. That assessment was accurate. Japanese night fighting doctrine was excellent for conditions where both sides operated under similar sensory limitations. When one side gained sensors that eliminated those limitations, the doctrine optimized for different conditions could not compete. American technological superiority was not inevitable. Japan had access to similar physics, similar industrial capability, similar scientific talent. The difference was doctrinal. American doctrine integrated technology as primary capability and trained accordingly. Japanese doctrine treated technology as supplement to existing techniques and trained accordingly. By mid-1943, dozens of United States capital ships carried SG radar. By 1944, essentially all frontline destroyers had effective surface search radar integrated into combat information center procedures. The technological advantage widened as American production and installation outpaced Japanese efforts. Documented hit probabilities for first salvos rose markedly versus pre-radar baselines. Pre-radar night gunnery. Typically less than 5% hits in first 3 salvos. Radar-directed night gunnery. 15 to 25% hits in first 3 salvos. The improvement was 4 to 5 times better accuracy. That translated directly to combat effectiveness. Washington's clean deck at dawn symbolized the revolution. A battleship that shot in darkness sailed away with undisturbed paint. That image became iconic in naval training. It represented the goal, perfect information dominance translating to perfect tactical execution. The engagement validated 2 years of radar development investment. Validated revised doctrine. Validated training programs. Validated equipment procurement decisions. Every element of the radar night fighting system worked as designed under combat conditions. This gave United States Navy confidence to expand and accelerate the programs. Most importantly, it gave fleet commanders confidence to engage Japanese forces at night. Previously, night was Japanese domain. American surface forces avoided night action when possible. After 14 November 1942, American commanders sought night action, knowing radar provided decisive advantage. A battleship that recorded main battery hits before her bridge crew could see the target. That capability changed night warfare forever. December 1942 through January 1943. South Pacific Theater. Henderson Field Operations Boards showed remarkable change. Night bombardments. 0 since mid-November. Tokyo Express sortie counts. Decreased from double-digit monthly totals in October to single digits in December. Japanese naval forces continued operations but with increased caution. Night supply runs still occurred but at reduced frequency. Destroyer missions avoided areas where American radar-equipped surface forces might be present. The aggressive confidence of August and September was gone. American naval staff collated interception statistics. The data showed clear pattern. Japanese night surface activity declined sharply after Kirishima's loss. When sorties did occur, they withdrew immediately upon radar contact rather than pressing forward. Japanese commanders knew American forces could now fight effectively at night. That knowledge changed Japanese tactical behavior fundamentally. Radar installations accelerated across United States Pacific Fleet. Priority went to battleships, cruisers, and destroyers operating near Guadalcanal. But the program extended fleet-wide. By year-end 1942, the majority of major combatants carried SG or equivalent radar. By mid-1943, saturation coverage was achieved. Integration with Combat Information Center procedures followed equipment installation. Radar plotting teams trained extensively. Tracking procedures standardized. Communication protocols refined. The technology was only as effective as the doctrine and training supporting it. American forces developed comprehensive systems around the radar capability. Japanese forces struggled with technical and doctrinal responses. Radar development programs existed but lagged behind American efforts in wavelength, resolution, and range. More critically, Japanese doctrine remained centered on optical night fighting. Radar was added to existing procedures rather than replacing them. The doctrinal adaptation never matched the technical challenge. Tokyo Express operations that did proceed faced different tactical environment. American surface groups now initiated contact at ranges exceeding Japanese optical capabilities. American forces chose engagement geometry based on radar information. American gunnery achieved first salvo accuracy that Japanese forces could not match at night. The psychological effect was significant. Japanese sailors and officers lost confidence in night superiority. American forces gained confidence in night capability. That psychological shift translated to tactical aggression or caution accordingly. Henderson Field statistics told the strategic story. Daily sortie counts remained stable from November onward. Aircraft availability remained high. Interdiction missions continued uninterrupted. The airfield that Japanese commanders intended to neutralize through bombardment remained fully effective throughout the campaign. Ground operations on Guadalcanal reflected the naval balance. With air superiority maintained, American ground forces received supplies and reinforcements reliably. Japanese ground forces faced increasing shortages as supply runs were interdicted. The naval balance translated directly to ground campaign success. South Pacific Force Monthly Summary for December 1942 included key assessment. Night surface surprise events reduced to negligible incidents following mid-November actions. Radar-equipped forces demonstrate consistent detection and engagement superiority. Enemy Tokyo Express operations declining in frequency and success rate. That assessment became foundation for operational planning throughout the Pacific theater. Night was no longer Japanese advantage. Night was neutral condition where American technological superiority could be applied decisively. This changed strategic calculus for island campaigns, convoy operations, and fleet engagements. Japanese staff signals showed increasing concern about American radar capability. Intelligence assessments noted widespread United States radar installations. Technical analyses attempted to quantify American radar performance. Recommendations urged accelerated Japanese radar development and doctrinal revision. But recommendations and implementation are different challenges. Japanese industrial capacity was strained. Radar production competed with other priorities. Doctrinal change required extensive retraining. The institutional momentum of successful night fighting tradition resisted change. By the time Japanese forces developed improved radar and revised doctrine, American advantages had multiplied. The strategic impact extended beyond Guadalcanal. The failure to neutralize Henderson Field through naval bombardment meant the island remained viable as airbase. That meant continued pressure on Japanese positions throughout the Solomons. That meant extended campaign with mounting Japanese losses in ships, aircraft, and trained personnel. Attrition warfare favored the side with greater industrial and training capacity. American losses in ships and aircraft could be replaced. Japanese losses created permanent gaps. The Guadalcanal campaign became war of attrition that Japan could not win. Naval surface losses exemplified the attrition problem. Japan lost battleships Hai and Kirishima within 3 days in November 1942. American production could replace losses. Japanese production struggled to maintain force levels. Each major unit lost permanently weakened Japanese capabilities. American commanders recognized the turning point. Radio intercepts and intelligence assessments showed declining Japanese naval activity. Photo reconnaissance revealed reduced Japanese ship presence in forward areas. The operational tempo was shifting in American favor. January 1943 marked final major Japanese efforts to reinforce or evacuate Guadalcanal. These operations occurred without heavy bombardment support. The naval surface capability to suppress Henderson Field was gone. Japanese forces conducted evacuation under air attack, losing additional destroyers and transports. By February 1943, organized Japanese resistance on Guadalcanal ceased. The campaign was over. American victory was complete. The island that Japan had held since May 1942 was firmly American. Henderson Field, the strategic objective that justified the entire campaign, was secure. Post-campaign analysis identified the naval night actions of November as decisive turning points. Specifically, the prevention of Kirishima's bombardment mission preserved Henderson Field at the critical moment. That preservation maintained air superiority. That air superiority determined ground campaign outcome. Radar technology was not the only factor in American Guadalcanal victory. Logistics, air power, industrial capacity, and ground combat all contributed. But radar night fighting capability was the decisive factor in preventing Japanese naval bombardment. That prevention preserved the airbase. That airbase enabled everything else. The lesson was clear. Technology that provides decisive advantage in one tactical area can affect entire strategic campaigns. Radar for night surface combat affected more than naval battles. It affected air operations, ground combat, logistics, strategic planning. The ripple effects extended far beyond the immediate tactical application. Japan lost one battleship in the Second Naval Battle of Guadalcanal. But Japan lost much more than one ship. Lost night supremacy. Lost bombardment capability. Lost strategic initiative. Lost campaign momentum. Lost Guadalcanal. The technological defeat translated to operational and strategic defeat. The United States gained more than one victory. Gained confidence in radar night fighting. Gained validated doctrine. Gained operational flexibility.
Gained Strategik Initiative.
Gained Guadalcanal. The technological advantage translated to strategic victory. In the waters of Iron Bottom Sound, radar replaced the searchlight, and night combat changed for the rest of the war. Washington Navy Yard. Gunnery Instruction Classroom. 1943. An instructor stands before blackboards covered with range gate diagrams and fire control equations. Students, fire control officers from newly commissioned destroyers, study the Guadalcanal night engagement as model combat problem. Washington detected targets at 18,000 yards. The instructor explains. Visual range that night was less than 3,000 yards. Radar provided 6-to-1 range advantage before engagement began. That advantage decided the battle before the first salvo. The lesson was taught hundreds of times across dozens of training facilities. The Washington-Kirishima engagement became case study in technology-changing warfare fundamentals. Every gunnery officer, every radar operator, every combat information center plotter studied the engagement. Pre-war naval doctrine emphasized searchlights, star shells, and optical rangefinders for night combat. Post-Guadalcanal doctrine eliminated those techniques except as backup. Radar detection became primary. Radar tracking became primary. Radar-directed fire control became primary. Optical systems became secondary confirmation tools. The doctrinal shift reflected technical reality. Radar worked better than optics at night. Radar-directed gunnery was more accurate than optical gunnery in darkness. The training, equipment, and procedures adapted to technological capability. By mid-1943, American doctrine assumed radar capability in night surface combat. Battle plans were written around radar tracking. Tactics emphasized radar ambush positions. Training focused on radar plot interpretation. The entire system reoriented around electronic sensors. Fleet-wide deployment followed training programs. Radar installations reached saturation coverage by late 1943. Not just capital ships, destroyers, destroyer escorts, even patrol craft received surface search radar. The technological advantage became fleet-wide capability. Integration with fire control systems improved continuously. Early SG installations required manual data transfer from radar plot to fire control. Later installations automated data flow. By 1944, integrated systems computed firing solutions directly from radar returns without human intermediary. The fire control loop became increasingly automated. Destroyer night engagements from late 1943 onward showed dramatic accuracy improvements. Hit rates on first salvos exceeded pre-war daylight averages. Night ceased to be limiting factor on gunnery effectiveness. American destroyers sought night action, knowing radar provided overwhelming advantage. Japanese forces never achieved comparable capability. Radar development continued but could not close the gap. American advantages in wavelength, resolution, and integration remained throughout the war. Japanese night fighting doctrine remained partially dependent on optical systems. That dependence meant continued disadvantage. Naval historian Samuel Eliot Morison later characterized the Washington-Kirishima action as doctrinal pivot point. His multi-volume naval history devoted extensive analysis to the engagement. Morison concluded, 14 November 1942 marked the end of Japanese night supremacy and the beginning of American technological dominance in night surface combat. Post-war Japanese naval analyst Fukui Shirzua reached similar conclusion from opposite perspective. His analysis stated, "The night belonged to the Americans after Guadalcanal. Our doctrine was optimized for different technical conditions. When those conditions changed, our doctrine became obsolete faster than we could adapt." Both analyses emphasized the same point. Technology changed tactical conditions. Doctrine optimized for previous conditions failed under new conditions. Adaptation speed determined who won and who lost. American adaptation was rapid because doctrine was built around technological capability from the beginning. Radar development and tactical doctrine development proceeded in parallel. Equipment and training matched. Installation and implementation synchronized. The system was coherent from technical foundation through tactical application. Japanese adaptation was slow because doctrine was established before technology developed. Night fighting techniques were refined over decades of training. Radar was added to existing doctrine rather than doctrine being rebuilt around radar. The system remained partially dependent on optical techniques that radar rendered obsolete. Documented hit probabilities told the quantitative story. American radar-directed night gunnery. First salvo hit rates 15 to 25%. Japanese optical night gunnery. First salvo hit rates 3 to 5%. The 5-to-1 accuracy advantage translated directly to combat outcomes. Production statistics showed technological advantage multiplying. By end of war, American forces had installed thousands of radar sets across hundreds of ships. Japanese forces had installed hundreds of radar sets with limited capability across reduced fleet. The gap widened continuously. Capital ship engagements after Guadalcanal showed consistent pattern. American radar detected first. American fire control achieved solution first. American gunnery hit first. Japanese forces reacted to situations American forces initiated. The technological advantage became operational dominance. The Washington-Kirishima engagement was the clearest early demonstration. One battleship with radar defeated one battleship with optics. The result was not close. Kirishima was destroyed without achieving single hit on Washington. That outcome ratio, complete victory with zero damage, demonstrated technological advantage at its most decisive. Later engagements showed similar patterns. Battle of Surigao Strait in October 1944. American battleships engaged Japanese forces at night using radar fire control. Result: decisive American victory with Japanese forces destroyed. Philippine Sea night actions. American radar-equipped forces engaged and destroyed Japanese ships attempting night approaches. Okinawa night actions. American pickets with radar detected and engaged Japanese night attacks repeatedly. Every major night surface action from November 1942 onward showed American advantage. The pattern was consistent. Radar detection, radar tracking, radar fire control. Victory. The technology worked. The doctrine worked. The training worked. Technical documentation preserved the details. Fire control manuals, radar operation guides, combat information center procedures, training curricula, all reflected lessons from Guadalcanal. All emphasized radar as primary night fighting capability. All trained personnel to exploit technological advantage. Kirishima wreck lies 600 feet down in Iron Bottom Sound. Post-war surveys documented the damage pattern. Hits clustered around critical areas. Penetration of belt armor. Destruction of superstructure. Flooding in multiple compartments. The physical evidence matched Washington's after-action report precisely. The wreck represents more than one ship. It represents doctrine made obsolete by technology. It represents tactical advantage erased by industrial capability. It represents the moment technology changed warfare fundamentally. Washington herself was scrapped after the war, but her legacy persisted. Every radar-equipped warship traces lineage to that November night. Every combat information center procedure reflects lessons learned in that engagement. Every fire control computer evolution builds on that foundation. The Washington-Kirishima action stands as clearest early case where information, not illumination, decided battleship duel. The side that could see electronically defeated the side that could only see optically. The engagement was not decided by courage, training, or tradition. It was decided by wavelengths. 10-centimeter radar waves penetrated darkness that stopped visible light. That technical fact changed naval warfare. Night ceased to be Japanese advantage. Night became American advantage. The strategic implications extended throughout the Pacific War and beyond. In waters off Savo Island, radar replaced the searchlight, and the geometry of night combat changed for the rest of the war. What is your perspective on this part of history? Share your thoughts in the comments, because every memory and reflection helps keep the past alive.